called to be an apostle, given the opportunity to walk on water. God told Peter who Jesus was. Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. He, with two others, were given the privilege of seeing Moses and Elijah come in glory and talk to Jesus about the coming exodus of Jesus from Jerusalem. He made a commitment not only that expressed that if everybody else denies you, I will not. And then to even strengthen that, he said, I will die with you. And now, the fall. Do you remember that Jesus, well, if I may, Simon, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. And I prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you turn, strengthen the brethren. Luke 22, 31 through 34. But fail he would. It wasn't that he hadn't been told that he would be a fisher of men. In other words, a man who could gather other people together with Jesus. It wasn't that he had not been told by God, by the Father himself, who Jesus was. And it wasn't that he had not been promised the keys of the kingdom. It wasn't that he hadn't been present at the transfiguration. It wasn't that he had committed himself above all others to Jesus, nor that he was willing to die to defend his master. Nor was it the fact that he had not been the first one to draw the sword to do the very thing that he had promised that he would do. There were only two swords among the apostles, and apparently he had one of them. And whenever they come to take Jesus, can you picture in your mind? Peter steps out in front of Jesus, draws his sword, and swings it in order to kill the first person who's closest to him. And it turned out to be Malchus, a servant of the high priest. I can only imagine what happened, for it says he only cut off his ear. But if I were Malchus, that's why he would only get my ear. And Jesus said to him, put up your sword. Those who live by the sword will die by the sword. And he picks up Malchus's ear. And by the power that is within him, he puts it back in place. I'm guessing he was at best confused. How can you use the keys of the kingdom if the king is dead? How can you be a fisher of men following Jesus if he's gone? How can we 12 have any influence in this world when there is a dead leader to follow? humiliated. He steps out front, takes a swing with his sword, and what does Jesus do? Fight on, Peter. We shall win. Not only does he tell him to put his sword up, but there is another true sense in which he was humiliated and rebuked. Because Jesus says, or do you think I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once put at my disposal more than 12,000 angels? Do you know what he just told Peter? I don't need your help. I do not need your sword. In fact, how then will the Scriptures be fulfilled which say that it must happen this way? Personally, and I think with a certain amount of justification biblically, I think Peter was still looking for an earthly kingdom and an earthly king. And that Jesus was going to go to the city of Jerusalem, claim the palace of Herod, and sit on the throne of David, and rule in the earth as an earthly kingdom from the city of Jerusalem, and the men that he had been with will be his primary ambassadors, primary commanders, primary leaders under the leadership of Jesus. But that cannot happen if Jesus is dead. I don't know what there was about Jesus that compelled Peter to later follow. Because at first the text says that all of the disciples left him. And yet there seemed to be a compulsion, at least among two of those disciples of Jesus, John and Peter, to follow. What's going to happen? I guess I will watch him condemned and die. Maybe that was Peter's thoughts. But he's not what I thought, and he's not what I wanted. And yet, John 18, verses 15 through 16 tell us, Simon Peter was following Jesus, and so was another disciple. Now that disciple was known to the high priest and entered with Jesus into the court of the high priest. But Peter was standing at the door outside. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out and spoke to the doorkeeper and brought Peter in. Fall number one. Now Peter was sitting outside the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. Incidentally, we know it happened to be the one who was the doorkeeper by another gospel. A servant girl came to him and said, "You too were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before them all. Do you remember what he said? If everybody else denies you, I won't. He denied it before them all. I do not know what you're talking about. This was an emphatic plea of ignorance. I don't know what you're talking about. This was said less than 4 hours after he had said, "I will not deny you." And just after Jesus had told him, Satan has demanded permission to sift you like wheat. You ever felt that way? Have you ever felt that Satan was sifting you like wheat? Challenging your faith to the core? You need to keep that in mind because of the way our lesson today is going to end. Fall number 2. Matthew 26, 71 and 72. When he had gone out to the gateway, another servant girl saw him and said to those who were there, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." This is not a question. It's not, well, aren't you with Jesus the Galilean? This is someone who said, this man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again, he denied it with an oath. Do you ever hear people use oaths today in flippant ways? I swear if it doesn't rain, my crops are going to be ruined. You know, I hear people say things like that. I'm not talking about that kind of oath that's flippant. I'm talking about a man who is willing to say before God, I do not know him. Not only was it an emphatic denial, it was affirmed with an oath that his denial was valid before God. Fall number 3. Matthew 26, 73 and 74. A little later, the bystanders who saw him with Jesus in the garden. We find that in the book of John, not Matthew. Who saw him with Jesus in the garden, came up to Peter and said, "Surely you too are one of them, for even the way you talk gives you away." Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know the man." I'm not going to put the word in here. You just fill it in for yourself. But have you ever heard anyone say, "Well, I'll be," in a flippant way? Peter said that, but he was not kidding. "May I be blank. I swear before God, I do not know the man." There is no way that he could have strengthened that denial that I'm aware of. Then he began to curse and swear, "I do not know the man." And immediately a rooster crowed. An emphatic denial, calling damnation upon himself and affirming his denial and curse with an oath. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had told him, "Before a rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went away and wept bitterly. Peter still didn't know that all of the things that had been promised him were coming his way. He didn't know what the keys of the kingdom were. He may have thought that he would be Jesus' chief executive officer. I don't know. He didn't know what they were. He didn't even fully understand what this kingdom was going to be. But it broke his heart, even in his ignorance, that he had denied knowing Jesus. The fall. Following the fall, Jesus was tried. Kangaroo court. Predetermined decision. Executed and raised from the dead. Peter must have been wondering what comes next. I do remember one thing that he said. I don't have it in my notes. But one thing he said to the other fellows was, let's go fishing. Why? Because that's the way he made his living. I guess it's back to the old routine. Let's go fishing. And they did. And their boat drew near to shore. And there was someone standing on the shore. And John said, it's Jesus. And Peter jumped out of the boat, must have been near shore, waded to shore, and greeted Jesus. And Jesus already had breakfast prepared for them, and he ate some of the breakfast, showing that he was resurrected in body, and this wasn't a ghostly spirit, but was a real resurrection. And it says in the text, so when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Oh, incidentally, did you notice that some of the words love are in capital letters and some are in small letters? That's because Jesus is using a different word for love than what Peter is using. In fact, the word love that Jesus used is that decision-based love to behave in the right way, whether we feel that way or not. In other words, to do right. But the word that Peter used is a word that's based upon friendship and personal respect and affection. I really feel good about you being my friend. You are a dear friend to me. And so the word that Jesus asked him is, do you have the deepest kind of love there is, more than these other men who are standing here, just like you said you would? And Peter said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I have you as my dearest friend. You know that I love you. The Greek words, agape, Jesus used it. Philia, that's the word Peter used. And Jesus said to him, tend my lambs. Is he going to get to be a fisher of men only if he loves Jesus more than everybody else? Can I bring this home to you? Are you going to get to be a Christian only when you love Jesus more than everybody else? Jesus is not done restoring this man. So he said to him again a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you notice any difference between the first time and the second? Do you see what he left off? He did not say, do you love me more than these other men? He just says, do you have the deepest love for me? Skip the other men. Just, do you have that kind of love at all? And he says, yes, Lord, you know that I really hold you dear as a friend. I really I really love you. And he said, shepherd my sheep. So does that mean only if your love for Jesus is that deepest, hardest, working, committed kind of love that he can use you? Shepherd my sheep, he said to Peter. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Do you see the difference? No longer the capital letters here, but he's using the same word that Peter used. Do you hold me dear in your heart? This is an affection, a emotion-based word. Or it can have the other in it, but its foundation is emotional. It requires a relationship that is built upon kindness, friendship, consideration, compassion. And so Jesus says, do you have that kind of love for me? And Peter was grieved, because he said to him the third time, do you like me? So let me take it home to you. Do you really like Jesus? We sing a song about that, don't we? What a blank I have in Jesus. What a friend I have in Jesus. Is Peter going to be good for anything if that's all that he has to offer Jesus? Are you going to be worth anything to Jesus if this is far as your love goes today? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And look at what Jesus said to him. You still have a job. You see, I don't think Peter knew that he still was going to get to use the keys of the kingdom. I don't think that Peter knew that he was going to be worthy to be fishers of men. Not after the strength of his denial. And did you know that happens to people today? I almost am willing, I'm willing to say that in all likelihood it's happened to somebody in here. That you have dropped to the bottom of your own perspective of God's bucket. Is Jesus willing? And does Jesus want? And does he have the power to lift you from the bottom of the bucket? And that's exactly what he did for Peter. This time the word Jesus used wasn't the deepest commitment. It was that other kind. It was that friendship kind of love. The fall, sifted like wheat. The cross, and now the restoration. A couple of lessons that I wanted us to get out of this. First of all, many people are looking for the wrong thing from Jesus, just like Peter was. They're looking for the wrong thing. They're looking for a Jesus who will help them to prosper financially. We even have preachers on television who are saying, if you will send me $1,000 of seed money, God will multiply that money and you will have more money in the bank than you ever imagined. Or as one well-known television preacher put it, if you have the faith of a bicycle, you'll ride a bicycle. But if you have the faith of a Rolls Royce, you'll drive a Rolls Royce. Kenneth Copeland. I guess Peter thought he was going to get a Rolls Royce of the kingdom. But that's not the kingdom Jesus had in mind. Not at all. Some people want to follow Jesus so that they can have their sins forgiven but not be His servant. I don't like this word slave that Paul says I am. I am a doulos. I am a slave of Jesus Christ, bought and paid for by His blood. Did you know that Christians are more a slave of Jesus than any human being slave ever has been to any human master? Because Jesus owns your soul. A human master cannot own your soul. Just the use of your body for a limited period of time. But when Jesus Christ is my master, He owns my body and my soul. And He wants to take them both, transformed into a spiritual body, to heaven one day. What an amazing thought that is. Jesus didn't die so we'd never get sick. Jesus didn't die so that a pregnancy would go wrong. Jesus didn't die so that my children wouldn't get killed in an automobile accident. Jesus, why did you die? So you can go to heaven, Bill. That's why I died. I died so you can go to heaven. And you don't have to love me more than everybody else in the whole world. Your love doesn't even have to be perfect, but you got to have enough love to follow me and be dear to me and let me be dear to you. And you will be useful in my kingdom. So lesson number one, Peter was thinking earthly, where might makes right and the sword would do what needed to be done. His vision of what Jesus came to do was not the real purpose of Jesus' coming. And Peter fell, and he fell hard. When we expect things of Jesus that are not in line with what He came to do, we can expect to fall, to be angry, to be disillusioned in much the same way that Peter was. Lesson number two. Even though Peter fell and hard, Jesus was willing to restore him to a role of His purpose. It's not the first time He had to pick Peter up, is it? You remember the water? You remember Peter looking around at the waves? You remember what he had to do? He called out for help, and what did Jesus do? He pulled him up. If you have fallen hard, He will pick you up. If you want to be picked up. Peter's love did not have to be perfect to still be useful to Jesus and the true purpose of His coming. And our love does not have to be perfect. We do not have to have all things straightened out before we can be useful as a tool in the hand of Jesus as we work in the spiritual kingdom that He came to build. I've had people tell me, well, Bill, I tell you what, when I get everything all kind of straightened out, I'll be down there at church. My friend, you're never going to get all things straightened out. And one of the preacher's jokes is that, yeah, old Bill told me when he got all things straightened out, he'd be to church, and here he is, all straightened out in the casket. Trouble is, that's not funny. If you think about it seriously. So, Jesus, what do you want from me? What do you want? Maybe this puts it real well. In the Sermon on the Mount, not quite in the middle of it, more past the middle, Jesus said to that audience there upon the mountain, seek first His kingdom, that's His church, and His righteousness, that's holy living. And all these things shall be added to you. So do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will care for itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Jesus, what are you telling me? Don't focus on the here and now primarily. Focus primarily upon the then and there, and we'll work together on the here and now. He didn't die so I could have a roof over my head, or good health, or a wife and a family. Folks, that's icing on the cake. He died so I can go to heaven. And that's the same reason He died for you. We're going to stand and sing the hymn of invitation. Do you have any idea? I don't. How much He loves you. I am incapable of grasping the greatness of His love for me, so that He hears every prayer I pray. And He knows my tears. And He knows my joy. And He knows my days.